Sovereignty answers the question, who rules? And however that question is answered tells you something very central about any country. It is a fundamental question in political science, we like to say. Who rules and why? Lincoln says every nation has a central idea from which all its minor thoughts radiate. That idea would be expressed in the notion of sovereignty. Who really does get to decide who's in charge? In the American Revolution, it might have been the greatest warrior, George Washington. In fact, it was he. But is that how he was chosen or why he was chosen? It might have been the best born person, the oldest family, and the eldest son of the oldest family in all of the British Empire, and that would have been George III. But they chucked him out. It might have been the richest guy. One of those was John Hancock. So those are competing claims that are famous in history. Which one did they choose? How did they decide? Where does sovereignty lie in a country with these principles? So in the 63rd Federalist, one of our readings, what does Madison say is unique about the American government? This is complicated because it's one of the most complicated sentences the man ever wrote. Somebody read it.
The true distinction between these and the American governments lie in the total exclusion of the people and their collective capacity from any share in the latter, and not in the total exclusion of the representatives of the people from the administration of the former.
So the meaning of that sentence depends entirely on what latter and what former means, and it's a heck of a deal to figure that out. And I'm just going to assert to you that I know what it means, and you guys can prove me wrong next time. But just remember that what is plain in the sentence, without trying to identify whatever he's talking about, former and latter, is that the people in their collective capacity have been entirely excluded from something, right? What is that something? In America, in the government of the United States, in the federal government, what is it that the people do absolutely none of?
Make the laws.
Creating the judiciary branch.
Enforcing laws.
They are not judges, they are not legislators, and they are not executives over the law. They are entirely excluded from the operation of the government. Isn't that odd, right? In England and Great Britain, at the time of the American Revolution, who was the executive?
The king. The king.
And his ministers, right? And who was the sovereign?
The king.
The king, right? So the one possessing legitimate title to rule occupied the executive branch. In Athens, who was the legislature?
The people.
The people. And who was the sovereign?
The people.
The people. You know why Athens didn't last a long time? Our professor Paul Ray in the history department, who's a very brilliant man, has got this 3 books on Sparta that's just an awesome achievement. Sparta lasted a long time. And he is the one who pointed this out to me. I had not known it. Sparta had division of powers in the Constitution. Whereas Athens was just the people would meet and they were always changing their mind. And so in America, it is different because unlike Athens, unlike England, unlike even Sparta, all the sovereignty is ours. We may not be governed except by our consent. And if we don't give it, no governing. All government is illegitimate except with that. And of course, it follows from that that in the practical operation of the government, since unanimity is impossible, majority rule. And of course, in a college, in a proper college, if you disagree, somebody's wrong. We're here to find out who's wrong and who's right. Well, we always disagree. How are we ever going to figure it out, right? But yeah, so there's going to be voting and there's going to be disagreement, and we're not going to reach unanimity. Why is the majority the right thing?
It seems like it's more probable that more people, since it's not a mob at that time, because they're voting on something in a Republican fashion, that they would have considered it in a way that would refine their opinions.
Ooh, that's really novel. I don't think it's true. All men are created equal. You got 300 people. 160 want to do A, and 140 want to do not A. If you do what the 140 says, you've got yourself an aristocracy, right? In other words, the majority of equal souls has to stand in for the unanimous consent, right? And in anything not fundamental, or anything that involves the ongoing operation of the government, that's what you need. You see? So the point is, you're going to have majorities rule. You're going to have representation. And that gives rise to something new. And Madison says that it's never happened before. It's unique. The sovereign is the people, as expressed by what I'll introduce a new phrase that Abraham Lincoln liked. The people, as they express their will through their constitutional majority, is the only true sovereign of a free people. And so that's where sovereignty is. That's where the right to say, the legitimate title to rule is. But those people, the sovereign, are entirely excluded from the operation of the government. Do you see now how the first check on the government is that we must consent? But the second check on the government is that we, who have the power to consent, do not run the government. And that second check is a check on us. In the argument between the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist, the Anti-Federalists argue a lot that local is more trustworthy. And they got their say extensively, right? Because for most of American history, but not lately, local government did most everything. The federal government is the most powerful of our governments, but it's a government of enumerated powers, right? And so limited in what it can do, supreme in what it can do, limited in what it can do, right? But the Federalist counter is not. Central is better. And it's certainly true that the constitutional government was called, the Constitutional Convention was called to make a more powerful government. At the center, the Federalist answer is that every human exercise of power must be restrained by reason. And there are constitutional forms that have to be implemented that can help bring that out. And if the first constitutional form is representation, the method by which we give our ongoing consent, the second is the separation between sovereignty and power. And Madison even says this, just think, it'll be great to have a big republic, he says, because a whispering campaign won't be very effective. Don't you notice in your relations with other people that it's a great thing if you can say out loud what you really mean? And that all friendships depend on that? And all goodwill and all sustenance of good relations means people need to be able to talk candidly. And Madison says because it's going to be big, it's going to have to be more candid, but also add the fact that these constituencies that we have are spread all over the place, right? Congress are little compact constituencies, equal in population roughly, but all over the country. But then the Senate is these big states. And then the president comes to be through a third way that's changed some over time, but forever now, the Electoral College, bearing some relation to the popular vote, but also direct relation to carrying a sufficient number of states, which means the presidential vote spread across the country, right? And so that means that we got to wait for elections, and to influence elections, we've got to talk to a lot of people across a vast area. And Madison says that'll make us candid. Hard to lie. You know? I mean, it sounds kind of funny to say that it's hard to lie in American politics, because we all think politicians are all liars, right? But are they? Is this like the Soviet Union? Contest what they say and they'll shoot you? They write the newspapers, right? This It's a fierce battle for public opinion out in the open in America all the time. And it has to go on for a long time before we actually reach a decision. Was it Christian who said, you know, it takes forever? Or Steve, maybe, who said, you know, elections take forever, you know, and you got to have a big build-up and it makes us fight? Madison thinks that's good. He thinks it's good that it takes time. And we can't do anything ourselves. And we can't even change all the government at once. It takes at least 6 years to change everything in the government. Isn't that remarkable? So, you get consent, and that gives rise to representation, and that gives rise to a separation between the sovereign and the government. And Madison says, this has never been done before.